In my previous life, I didn't realize until the moment I died how much my young and promising husband, Ethan Grant, loved me. After being reborn, I decided to turn over a new leaf and live a good life with him. But my reputation was terrible. The other military wives mocked me and shut me out, and my fake sweet best friend Lily Summers stoked the flames every day, waiting to see us divorce. Even Ethan looked at me coldly and asked, "Are you divorcing me or not?" I hooked my arms around his neck and said, "I'm not. I'll stay with you. I'll even give you 3 children." He frowned. "Emily, stop it. What are you trying to do now?" When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the very scene where I was forcing Ethan to divorce me. He sat across from me in his uniform, frost between his brows, his fingers gripping a pen, just waiting for me to sign so we could go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. Outside the door, Lily was putting on an act, pretending to persuade me. I suddenly stood up, grabbed the 2 copies of the agreement in front of everyone, and tore them to pieces. Under Ethan's furious, startled gaze, I walked around the table and hugged him tightly. "I'm not divorcing. Even if I die, I won't leave you. Not only am I staying, I'll give you 3 big, healthy sons." My tears fell in heavy drops onto his epaulettes, burning hot. Ethan's whole body stiffened. He probably thought I was pulling some new trick and tried to push me away by force. Lily was dumbfounded, then shrieked, "Emily Reed, are you crazy? Let go of Ethan!" I ignored her and just held Ethan tighter, speaking softly beside his ear in a voice only he could hear. "The wound on your left waist, the bullet grazed you 3 centimeters. It's still bleeding. Last night at 2 in the morning, the pain kept you awake. You sat alone in the study, smoking." Ethan's body went rigid again, and his attempt to push me stopped. This mission was classified. No one but him knew about the injury. He had never told anyone. I felt his breathing falter for a moment and pressed on. "And your right shoulder, the old injury from 3 years ago during the training exercise, it still aches unbearably whenever it rains. Stop forcing yourself, or when you're older, you won't even be able to lift that arm." I had pieced all of this together in my previous life after he died, from his belongings and from what his comrades told me. He had always been like that, carrying all the pain by himself, never sharing a word of it with me, while I never truly cared. The strength of Ethan's grip on my wrist loosened unconsciously. He looked down at me, and for the first time those always cold, dark eyes showed shock and hesitation. Outside, when Lily saw that Ethan hadn't reacted for a long while, she panicked and burst in. "Ethan, don't let her fool you. She just doesn't want a divorce. She's acting again." I let go of Ethan and turned to glare at her coldly. "Lily, this is between husband and wife. Since when does an outsider like you get to meddle?" Lily was left speechless, her face turning pale and red at once. I was only worried about you 2, she stammered, casting a pleading look at Ethan. But Ethan's eyes stayed on me, filled with scrutiny and an emotion I couldn't read. He ignored Lily and instead said to me calmly, "Go inside first." He clearly meant to talk to Lily alone. I nodded obediently, went into the bedroom, and after closing the door, pressed my ear against it to listen. "Ethan, don't believe Emily." Lily's voice was sharp and anxious. "She must be up to something again, trying to cling to you so she doesn't have to leave, and to get more compensation." "Enough," Ethan's voice cut cold as ice. "This is my family matter. I'll handle it myself. You should go back." Ethan's voice was firm, without the slightest hesitation, openly dismissing her. The hallway outside went quiet for a moment, then I heard Lily Summers' sobs, followed by the sound of her stomping away in grievance. I let out a long breath. At least this time things weren't like in my past life, when he'd let a few provoking words from her turn into scolding me. This was a good start. The door opened, and Ethan walked in. "How did you know?" he asked bluntly, his tone still wary. The room was dimly lit, and his tall figure carried a weight that pressed down on me. I knew my behavior earlier had been too unusual. There was no way he would trust me right away. Instead of answering, I went to the nightstand, pulled out a small bottle of medicated oil, something he had once gone out of his way to have someone buy for me when I twisted my ankle. "Sit down. Let me rub it in for you," I said, reaching for his hand, trying to pull him to the edge of the bed. But he jerked his hand back like he'd been burned, the distance in his eyes sharper than ever. Emily, stop playing these tricks. My heart felt like it was pricked with needles. I knew an icy wall like this wasn't built overnight. All the foolish things I'd done before had already worn down his patience and left him completely disappointed in me. I didn't push further. I simply set the bottle on the nightstand. The medicine's here. If it hurts too much, put some on yourself. Hugging my pillow, I quietly walked over to the narrow camp bed in the corner of the room, the one he usually used whenever he came home late from overtime. The large double bed had always been mine alone. Ethan's brows moved ever so slightly as he watched me settle there. That night, we slept in separate beds, with nothing more happening between us. When I woke the next morning, Ethan was already gone. The bottle of medicated oil on the nightstand had disappeared. Warmth spread through my chest. He had used it after all. The storm over our divorce quieted down for now, but my reputation in the compound was ruined completely. Lily went everywhere spreading rumors, saying I was doing anything I could to avoid divorce, clinging to the Grant family just to live comfortably. The other military wives had already disapproved of me for acting like a spoiled city girl, and now they avoided me altogether. When I went out to fetch water, they huddled together, pointing fingers. Look at her. The captain must have been cursed to marry her. She's nothing but lazy good-for-nothing. All she knows is how to throw tantrums. If you ask me, he should divorce her and let Lily marry him. That would be a real match of talent and beauty. Their words were like knives, each one stabbing deep. In the past, I would have jumped up in anger, fought with them, and only made Ethan lose face even more. But now, I kept my eyes straight ahead, fetched the water, and walked home without a word. The best way to deal with gossip wasn't to argue, but to ignore it. Back home, staring at the empty house and my equally empty pockets, a sharp sense of crisis rose inside me. I couldn't live the way I had before, just depending on Ethan. I needed my own career, my own financial independence. I began carefully recalling what opportunities there had been around this time in my previous life. Soon, one thing came to mind: the batch of defective fabric at the Supply and Marketing Cooperative. In the 1980s, cloth was in high demand, and buying it required ration tickets. But I remembered clearly, this very week, the cooperative would make a mistake in the printing and dyeing process, resulting in a batch of floral cotton with tiny flaws. The colors were bright, but random small white spots would appear on the fabric. To people back then, it was defective, unwanted, and the cooperative would eventually sell it off as scrap at an extremely low price. But to me, someone who had lived decades in the future, those weren't flaws at all. That was the beginning of what would later become a fashion craze, the polka dot trend. I rummaged through every drawer and box, gathering all the money I had hidden away. It added up to 23 yuan and 50 cents. For the times, that wasn't a small sum, but I knew it still wasn't enough. I needed more capital. I waited the whole day. It wasn't until late at night that Ethan Grant came home, his body heavy with exhaustion. He carried a faint smell of alcohol mixed with medicated oil. When he saw I was still awake, his steps faltered slightly in surprise. "What is it?" he asked. Summoning my courage, I walked up to him. "Ethan, could you lend me some money?" His eyes instantly turned cold. I knew he would misunderstand. "You want to buy a train ticket home again?" His tone was filled with displeasure. "Emily, can you stop making trouble? My allowance is limited. I have to support you and the family. Don't keep running away every other day." "I'm not running away," I said firmly, locking eyes with him. "I told you already, I want to give you 3 sons, but you always ignore me at night." I drew a steady breath and added, word by word, "I just want to start a small business." Ethan froze, his gaze sweeping up and down my figure. "You? Do business?" It was no wonder he reacted that way. In the 2 years we had been married, I had never lifted a finger in housework. I could barely cook, let alone talk about running a business. "Give me 100 yuan, I said, stretching out my hand with a resolute tone. "Think of it as me borrowing from you. Within a year, I'll pay you back with interest." Ethan fell silent. He stared at me for a long time, as if trying to find a crack in my expression. At last, he turned, went into the bedroom, and came back out with a wad of bills bound by a rubber band. He counted out 10 yuan notes and slapped them into my hand. "This is the last time," he said in a low voice. Emily, don't lie to me again. Don't leave me so easily again. I clutched the money. It wasn't just 100 yuan, it was the last bit of trust he was willing to give me. I understood how precious that was. That night, before bed, I carried him a bowl of hot soup I had prepared. Drink this first, warm your stomach. Without looking up from his papers, he muttered, No need, I'm not hungry. I want to live a good life with you, I said, gazing into his eyes. But you won't even give me a chance. He was silent for a long time before finally speaking, his voice hoarse. Trust isn't built by words. You destroyed mine long ago. Then he lifted me in his arms and laid me down on the bed. That night, for the first time since I had come back, my husband was intimate with me again, as forceful and overwhelming as ever. My heart surged with emotions all night long. The next morning, carrying the 123 yuan and 50 cents I now had, I braved the strange looks in the compound and boarded the bus to the county. I headed straight to the Supply and Marketing Cooperative, where I sought out Director Wang, the man in charge of handling defective goods. He was in his 40s, and when he saw a young woman like me wanting to buy flawed fabric, he looked at me in disbelief. Comrade, are you sure? This batch has defects, you can't make clothes with it, only rags. Don't worry, Director Wang. I know what I'm doing. I carefully chose the boldest prints, red polka dots, blue florals, and a bright yellow plaid. In the end, I cleared out the entire warehouse stock of over 200 meters of fabric, all for just 1 yuan a meter. I hired a flatbed cart to haul the rolls of fabric back to the compound. When the huge, colorful bundles appeared, everyone was stunned. A group of military wives gathered around. One of them, Mrs. Li, who was always gossiping, pursed her lips. Emily, did you empty out your savings to buy all this junk? What are you going to do with so much useless cloth? Make rags for Captain Grant? A round of laughter broke out among the crowd. I didn't get angry. I only smiled and said, Mrs. Li, don't be so sure of yourself. In a couple of days, don't come begging me to sell you some. After that, I ignored them and hauled the fabric home, puffing and panting all the way. For the next 2 days, I shut myself inside my room without stepping out once. I pulled out the old sewing machine I had brought from my parents' house, and relying on memories from my previous life, I began sketching designs, cutting fabric, and sewing. 2 days later, when Ethan Grant pushed open the door, he was met with the sight of the entire room filled with dresses. Fresh, stylish, and brilliantly colored. He froze at the threshold, staring at the rows of dresses and then at me, his eyes full of disbelief. These dresses were nothing like the ones he had seen in the department stores, with cinched waists, playful puff sleeves, and delicate bow collars. Each one was so beautiful it was hard to look away. You made all these? His voice was dry. I nodded, holding up a red dress with white polka dots against myself. Do you think it looks good? Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed as his gaze moved from the dress to my face. Under the lamplight, my eyes shone with expectation. He quickly looked away, answering in an awkward murmur, Yeah. That single word meant more to me than any elaborate praise. It looks good, he added, stepping closer, his tall figure blocking out the light from the doorway. The air grew warmer around us. It'll look even better on you. Before I could react, he closed the distance, his large hands gripping my waist and lifting me effortlessly. I let out a gasp as he set me down on the hardwood table beside the sewing machine. The sudden change in height left me a little dizzy, forcing me to tilt my head back to meet his face. With his arms braced on either side of me, I was trapped between his body and the table. His masculine scent filled my nose. His warmth enveloped me, and I could see the steady thrum of his pulse at his neck. The hem of the dress he had just slipped onto me, only to tug off again, fluttered faintly in the draft. The next day, I put on that very red polka dot dress and walked out of the house. The entire compound fell silent at once, every pair of eyes locking onto me. The vivid red set off my pale skin, the fitted cut outlined my slender waist, and the skirt swayed lightly with each step, lively and radiant. Compared to the lazy, gloomy figure I used to present, I was an entirely different person. Mrs. Li's mouth dropped wide enough to fit an egg. Isn't that from that batch of defective fabric at the cooperative? Yes, I answered with a smile. Mrs. Li, didn't I tell you? Her face flushed and paled by turns, but she couldn't say a word. Soon, One of the bolder wives edged closer and asked cautiously, "Emily, are you selling this dress?" "Yes." My lips curled in a smile. "That's exactly what I've been waiting for. 15 yuan each, no bargaining." Gasps echoed around us. After all, an ordinary worker only made 30 or 40 yuan a month. But seeing how striking the dress looked on me, many of them wavered. The first to make up her mind was Zhang Jie, the regimental commander's wife next door. She came from a well-off family and loved to dress up. "I'll take one. I want the same red one you're wearing." Once there was the first buyer, the second and third quickly followed. In just one morning, all 20-odd dresses hanging in my room were snatched up. Not only had I recouped my costs, but I also earned more than 100 yuan in pure profit. For the first time, I stood tall with the money I had made myself. I had struck back at the lazy and useless label with my own strength. I had earned my very first bucket of gold. From then on, my position in the compound quietly began to change. The military wives who had once mocked me now looked at me with curiosity and envy. Some even took the initiative to greet me and, in roundabout ways, asked when I would be making more clothes. Only one person stared at me with eyes full of poison. Lily Summers. She looked at the wives beaming with joy as they wore the dresses I had made, and her expression twisted with jealousy. Lily Summers's face was so twisted with rage it was almost unrecognizable. When I handed 100 yuan back to Ethan Grant, he looked at me with an expression full of complicated emotions. "Keep it for yourself," he said, not reaching out. "No." We agreed it was a loan, I insisted, pushing the money into his hand. "That's the rule." This time he didn't refuse again and accepted it. That night, for once, he didn't shut himself in the study. Instead, he sat on the sofa in the living room, reading the newspaper. I poured him a glass of water and set it beside him. He took the cup. Then, with a twist of his wrist, he pulled me down onto the sofa with him. A few drops of water splashed onto the back of my hand, and I gasped softly at the heat. Ethan's tall frame loomed over me, his shadow covering me completely. "Weren't you the one who said you'd give me 3 sons?" His voice was low and hoarse against my ear, laced with a mocking edge. My heart thudded wildly under his weight, but I stubbornly lifted my chin. "Then give me the chance." He didn't answer with words. Instead, he let his actions speak. That night, he was no longer restrained as before, as if 2 years' worth of pent-up emotions finally found an outlet. From passively enduring to actively meeting him halfway, I surrendered to him beneath the moonlight, which soon hid itself behind the clouds in shyness. After these days together, I knew Ethan had begun to trust and accept me. But I still didn't know how deep that trust ran, or how long it would last. Not long after, Ethan was scheduled to lead his team in a critical joint exercise across military districts. The results of that exercise would directly affect his future promotion. In my previous life, it was precisely because of a mishap during this drill that he was demoted to a remote border post, where he eventually died in battle. I had to stop that tragedy from repeating. That afternoon, Lily Summers showed up at my door carrying a basket of fruit, smiling brightly. "Emily, I heard you made money from your business. I'm really happy for you." Her tone was humble, her demeanor full of warmth, like she truly wished me well. "I was immature before and said some things I shouldn't have. Please don't take them to heart." If I hadn't lived through it once before, I might have been fooled by her act. But now, I only responded politely while inside I raised my guard to the highest level. She sat for a while, then offered to help me clean the house. I refused, saying the house wasn't messy. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't press. After a bit of small talk, she excused herself and left. The moment she was gone, I immediately searched the house. Sure enough, at the very bottom of my wardrobe, tucked into the pocket of a coat I rarely wore, I found something that hadn't been there before, a folded military map. I recognized it at once. It was the exact same backup map that, in my previous life, had led to Ethan's disgrace during the exercise. Lily Summers had made her move. I had known she would, if not today, then someday soon. My hand turned cold as I clutched the map. All she needed now was to send an anonymous report, and both Ethan and I would be doomed. I couldn't just sit and wait for death. But what could I do? If I turned in the map right away and said Lily planted it to frame me, who would believe me? To everyone else, I was nothing more than a vain, troublesome woman, while Lily was gentle, kind, and understanding. If I took the map to Ethan, would he believe me? I wasn't sure. My heart burned with panic as a sudden, urgent knocking came at the door. "Comrade Emily, open up. Security Department routine inspection." At the door stood two stern-faced men in uniform, one of them the former chief of security. The courtyard outside was already crowded with military wives eager to watch the spectacle. Lily Summers stood among them, her face painted with just the right mix of worry and anxiety, yet in her eyes, carefully hidden, flickered a trace of triumphant malice. "Former chief, what is the meaning of this?" I asked, feigning confusion. The man's expression didn't waver as he held out a search warrant. "We received a report. You are suspected of hiding classified military documents. Please cooperate with the investigation." The moment his words fell, the entire courtyard erupted in shock. Hiding classified documents. That was espionage. Every gaze that fell on me was filled with suspicion, like I was already a traitor. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." Ethan Grant's voice cut through the noise. He had just come back from the training grounds, sweat still on his forehead, his uniform collar unbuttoned, clearly having rushed over the moment he heard the news. He strode over in long, powerful steps, placing himself firmly in front of me, shielding me with his broad back as he fixed the former chief with a razor-sharp stare. "Chief Chian, I know my wife better than anyone. She would never do such a thing." It was the first time he had ever defended me so openly in front of others. My eyes stung as I stared at his wide shoulders. Chief Chian looked troubled, but his duty was clear. "Captain Grant, we have to follow protocol. A search will reveal the truth." From the crowd, Lily Summers spoke slowly, her tone carefully measured. "Ethan, I know you trust Emily, but since everyone is watching, perhaps it's better to let the chief check. That way Emily's innocence can be proven." There she went again, playing her game. Ethan turned and shot her a cold glare. Under the weight of his eyes, Lily shrank back, silenced at once. The search began. 2 security officers rummaged through the house. I stood frozen, my palms slick with cold sweat. At some point, Ethan's hand found mine. His palm was broad, dry, and rough with calluses, but the strength in his grip steadied my pounding heart. Soon, one of the officers emerged from the bedroom holding an old coat. "Chief, we found something." He reached into the pocket and pulled out the folded map. Chief John's face darkened immediately, every eye in the courtyard fixed on the incriminating paper. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened suddenly. I felt the rigid tension in his body, and when he looked at me, I caught the flash of coldness in his eyes. Disappointment, shock, and the pain of betrayal. "Emily," his voice was quiet, but it landed on my heart like a hammer blow. "I was just beginning to trust you. And this is how you repay me?" He released my hand and stepped back. That single step felt like a chasm opening between us, one I could never cross. The crowd's whispers swelled like waves crashing over me. "My God, it's really her. I knew she was no good. A spy. Poor Captain Grant, this is like letting a wolf into the house." Lily covered her mouth, feigning shock, her eyes shining with barely concealed glee. "How could this be? Emily, how could you do such a thing?" I ignored them all. My eyes stayed locked on Ethan. I knew this was the critical moment, the very turning point that had destroyed him in my previous life. This time, I would not let history repeat itself. Meeting his gaze, I spoke slowly, each word clear and sharp. "Ethan Grant, this wasn't me. Give me 3 days. In 3 days, I'll expose the real culprit in front of all the leaders of the military district." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a steely resolve, a do-or-die determination. The courtyard fell silent, and everyone stared at me like I'd gone mad. Chief Chian's brows drew tight, and he barked, "Emily Reed, the evidence is in front of us, and you still dare to quibble?" Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on mine, searching the unwavering determination in them. Logic told him the evidence was irrefutable, and that I had no way to deny it. But something in my gaze made him falter, made him hesitate. Should he risk his future and believe me this one last time? Every eye in the courtyard turned to him, waiting for his decision. The seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Finally, he lifted his head and met Chief John's eyes. His voice was hoarse but unwavering. "Chief John, I believe my wife. I request the organization grant me 3 days to work with her to uncover the truth. If after 3 days it's proven she did this, I, Ethan Grant, will resign voluntarily and accept punishment alongside her. My tears finally broke free, streaming down my face. Ethan was gambling his entire future on me. Chief Chian stared at him for a long moment before sighing. Captain Grant, 3 days. You have 3 days. If there's no result, then both of you will face the military tribunal. The security officers withdrew, and the gossiping wives scattered, still buzzing with talk. Lily Summers lingered at the end, turning back to give me a final look. Her eyes gleamed with icy certainty, as though she was already confident of victory. Inside the house, only Ethan and I remained. The air was so heavy it felt suffocating. Finally, he broke the silence. Tell me. What's your plan? His voice carried no hint of emotion. I wiped away my tears and stepped in front of him. The first step is for you to cooperate with me in putting on a show. He arched a brow, signaling me to continue. From now on, you have to act completely disappointed in me, cold, even disgusted. We need to have a big fight, loud enough that the entire compound hears and believes you can't stand me anymore. Ethan's brows furrowed. Why? To throw Lily off her guard. I met his eyes and said clearly, that map was planted by her. She must be watching us right now. Only if we look broken apart will she relax enough to slip up. Ethan was silent. For him, trusting me was already the greatest concession he could make. To ask him now to believe that Lily, the woman who always seemed so gentle and kind, was the true culprit, was nothing short of a shock. Do you have proof? He asked, his voice edged with a barely perceptible struggle. No, I shook my head, but my instincts tell me it's her. Ethan, do you trust me? He fell silent again. I didn't press him. I knew he needed time to process it all. At last, he lifted his head, the struggle in his eyes replaced with clarity and resolve. All right, I'll play along. That very night, our home erupted in the fiercest quarrel since our marriage. Emily, how much longer are you going to keep this up? You've embarrassed me enough. Ethan's voice was thick with suppressed fury. He kicked the door so hard it slammed with a thunderous bang. Embarrassed? Now you know embarrassment? Where was that awareness when you married me? I snapped back, my voice sharp, and hurled an enamel cup to the floor. The shattering crash was loud enough to rattle half the compound. We fought over everything, my supposed wasteful spending, his neglect of the family for work. By the end, Ethan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I knew countless ears in the compound had heard every word. Lily's, most certainly, among them. Sure enough, the next day I was branded the scourge of the compound. No one dared speak to me. People crossed the road to avoid me as if I carried the plague. As I stepped out, I happened to run into Lily Summers. She walked toward me with a face full of concern. Emily, are you and Ethan all right? I heard everything last night. Don't blame him. He's under a lot of pressure too. I looked at her false compassion and laughed bitterly in my heart, though outwardly I let my shoulders slump, my expression defeated. He doesn't want me anymore. He must think I stole that map. Covering my face, I let out broken sobs. Lily, you're the only one still willing to talk to me. What should I do? A flicker of triumph flashed in her eyes, though her lips still shaped words of comfort. Emily, don't cry, Lily Summers whispered. Things will work out. Oh right, I heard. She leaned closer to my ear, lowering her voice. I heard the security department may have found a new witness, someone who can prove that the map wasn't taken by you. My heart stirred. The fish was about to bite the hook. This was the very piece of news I had asked Ethan Grant to have one of his most trusted comrades leak, accidentally, into Lily's ears. My goal was to rattle her, to make her panic and lose control. Really? I clutched her hand like I was grasping at my last lifeline. That's just what I heard, she said soothingly, patting the back of my hand. Don't pin too much hope on it, but if there truly is such a witness, then your name will be cleared. Her words were calm, but the flicker of fear in her eyes betrayed her. She was frightened. That was exactly what I expected. There was no way she had pulled this off alone. To steal a military briefcase and get hold of a backup map, she would have needed someone with access to Ethan's office. Not a high-ranking official, but someone low enough to be greedy and reckless. In my past life, after Ethan's downfall, I had desperately investigated the truth. While I never uncovered concrete evidence, every clue pointed to one man, Liu Bing, an orderly in the logistics department. A compulsive gambler drowning in debt, he was the perfect target for Lily to buy off. Now that word of a new witness had spread, Lily would not be able to sit still. She would definitely go to Liu Bing to confirm things, maybe even to plot her next move. All I had to do was wait for them to walk into the trap. I kept playing my role of the broken, helpless wife, crying every day, unable to eat, my body thinning with each passing day. Ethan, for his part, left early and came home late, his face cold, never speaking a word to me. To the outside world, our act of a shattered marriage was flawless. On the third day, the very deadline Chief Qian had given us, the military district held its quarterly mobilization meeting. Every officer above the battalion level was required to attend. As a nurse at the military hospital, Lily would also be there. It was the perfect moment to close the net. Before the meeting began, people gathered outside the auditorium. Groups of wives clustered together, and at the sight of me, they quickly dispersed as if I were cursed. Lily, dressed in a pristine white nurse's uniform, stood at the center of a circle of admirers, like the moon surrounded by stars. When she saw me standing alone in the corner, her lips curved into a barely noticeable smirk. Carrying a cup of water, she walked toward me with graceful steps. "Emily, you don't look well. Have some water." She held out the cup with gentle concern. I met her gaze coldly and spat a single word: "No." Her face stiffened for a moment, but she quickly composed herself, wearing once again that mask of pity. "Emily, I know you're in a bad place right now, but you can't just give up on yourself." She sighed, her voice pitched just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Honestly, I've always thought there was something strange about that map. The other day when I visited your house, I saw you sneaking something into your wardrobe. I thought it was some kind of treasure. Who knew? If only you had told me earlier, I might have been able to help you figure out a solution." Her words were artfully chosen. On the surface, she seemed to be speaking up for me, but in truth, she was planting the detail of me hiding the map right in front of everyone. It was the perfect move to seal my guilt and cut off every avenue of defense. Lily's words were like a boulder thrown into still water, sending ripples surging through the crowd. What? She saw Emily hiding the map with her own eyes? My God, what else is there to say? It must have been her. I knew Nurse Lily was kind. She even tried to defend Emily before. She must have reached her limit now. In an instant, I became the target of everyone's scorn. Their eyes brimmed with contempt and rage as though I were an unforgivable traitor, and Lily looked at me with the triumphant pride of a victor basking in her conquest. Bookmark. Go back. She thought his victory was already secured. But just then, Ethan Grant strode over from not far away. When he saw me surrounded in the middle and Lily Summers wearing that innocent look on her face, his brows knit together tightly. One of the wives close to Lily immediately rushed up to complain. "Captain Grant, you have to control your wife." Nurse Lily was only trying to comfort her, and she cursed her out. Now Nurse Lily even says she saw it with her own eyes. Emily hiding the map. What more is there to argue about? Ethan's face darkened until it seemed a storm could break. He didn't even glance at me. Instead, he went straight to Lily and asked, "You saw it with your own eyes?" Under his piercing gaze, Lily's heart quivered, but she forced herself to nod. "Yes, Ethan. I didn't mean to. I was just worried." Ethan cut her off coldly, then turned toward me. His eyes were filled with icy disappointment. "Emily, do you have anything to say?" My chest twisted with pain. I knew he was acting, but that look still pierced me like a blade. I bit my lip, unable to force out a single word. To the crowd, my silence was as good as an admission. Just then, a deputy political commissar of the military district happened to pass by. He stopped, his face dark as he called Ethan aside. "Ethan Grant, this is the woman you vouched for? Look what she's done. And you, an officer who can't even manage your own household, who shields a wife suspected of espionage. Where are your party principles?" His scolding rang out loud and clear, and everyone heard it. Ethan lowered his head and said nothing, but his fists clenched at his sides so tightly his knuckles cracked. I caught sight of Lily's lips curving into a cruel, triumphant smile. She thought Ethan and I were finished. The mobilization meeting officially began, and everyone filed into the auditorium according to unit and rank. As a dependent, I wasn't qualified to enter and could only wait outside. Before Ethan stepped in, he looked back at me once. I knew the real show was about to begin. Halfway through the meeting, the great doors of the auditorium swung open. Chief Chian from the security department marched up the aisle with 2 officers in tow. Taking the microphone, his expression grave, he announced, "Comrades, please quiet down. Before we proceed with the next item, I need to report a matter of great importance concerning our military security." The room fell instantly silent, all eyes on him. Lily sat in the nurses' section, her back straight, her face unable to hide its excitement. She thought this was the moment my punishment would be made public. After 3 days and nights of intensive investigation, Chief Chian continued, the case regarding Comrade Ethan Grant's wife, Emily Reed, suspected of stealing military secrets, has now been fully clarified. At his words, the auditorium buzzed with suppressed whispers. All eyes shifted toward Ethan in the front row. His expression was calm as still water, giving nothing away. "Now," Chief Chian said, "I will present a key piece of evidence we have just obtained." He nodded at the officer beside him, who produced a black tape recorder and pressed play. After a burst of static, a woman's shrill, anxious voice rang out clearly through the hall. "Liu Bing, didn't you say there was no way we could be caught? Now Ethan Grant says they've found a new witness. What's going on?" The voice was Lily Summers. Her face went bloodless in an instant. She lurched to her feet, shaking all over, staring at the tape recorder on the stage in disbelief. Then a man's nervous voice came through the speakers. I don't know, Nurse Lily, didn't you say Ethan and his wife were already falling apart? How could this? I don't care." The woman's voice snapped. "We're in this together. If I go down, you're not walking free either. Find out who that so-called witness is right now, and if you dare betray me, I'll expose the money you took." The man's voice stammered back, "Nurse Lily, don't worry. I'd rather die than confess," the male voice on the tape stammered before the recording cut off. The entire auditorium went silent, as if death itself had swept through. The evidence was irrefutable. Everyone was stunned. No one could have imagined that Nurse Lily, always so gentle, so kind, so eager to help others, was the mastermind behind it all. She hadn't just framed a comrade's family member. She had colluded with logistics personnel to steal classified military secrets. Lily Summers collapsed into her seat, her face ashen, muttering over and over, "No, it's not me. It's fake. It's fake." Chief Chian's cold gaze cut into her like a blade. "Lily Summers, Liu Bing, what else do you have to say for yourselves?" In the logistics section, a small, thin soldier's legs gave out beneath him, and he crumpled to the floor. It was Liu Bing. "Take them away," Chief Chian ordered. 2 security officers came down from the stage, 1 on each side, seizing Lily, who was already limp with despair, and dragged her off. 2 others restrained Liu Bing. As Lily was hauled past Ethan Grant, she suddenly thrashed like a madwoman, pointing at him and screaming, "Ethan, it was you! You set me up for that bitch. You would do this to me? I loved you so much. How am I any worse than her?" Her hysterical shrieks tore away the last of her pretense. Ethan never spared her even a glance. His eyes cut through the crowd and landed on the slender figure standing at the doorway. I was looking back at him. In that silent exchange, 1,000 words passed between us. The crisis had been averted. My name was cleared. Ethan's career was safe. Lily Summers, for framing an officer and attempting to leak classified information, was sentenced to 8 years, stripped of her post, and expelled from the compound. Liu Bing received 5 years for the same charges. The outcome was satisfying to everyone. From that moment, my standing in the compound completely shifted. Once branded as a cursed wife, I was now seen as resourceful and steady in the face of danger. The very wives who had ridiculed me before came to my door, bearing gifts. "Emily, we were blind before, saying so many awful things. Please don't hold it against us." That's right. Who knew Lily Summers would be like that? You really can't judge a person by appearances. You and Captain Grant are such a perfect match. We'll take you as our example from now on. I accepted their gifts with courtesy and sent them off the same way. I neither mocked them nor gloated. Having lived 2 lives, I was long past caring about such shallow flattery. I only cared about one man. That night, after the storm had passed, the house was quiet with only Ethan and me inside. He sat on the sofa, smoking in silence, the swirling smoke blurring his handsome features, making him look almost unreal. I walked over, took the cigarette from his hand, and crushed it into the ashtray. Stop smoking, it's bad for you. He lifted his head, his dark eyes locking onto mine. After a long moment, he suddenly reached out and pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly it felt like he wanted to fuse me into his very bones. I'm sorry. His head buried against my neck, his voice hoarse and trembling. Emily, I'm sorry. I froze. This man, this soldier who bled but never cried, was apologizing to me. I shouldn't have doubted you. I shouldn't have misunderstood you. It's over now, I interrupted gently, wrapping my arms around his strong waist. Ethan, you don't need to say sorry. It was me, Ethan said quietly, his voice hoarse with regret. I was the one who didn't treasure you. I was the one who didn't value what we had. I was the one who pushed you away. He didn't say anything more after that. He just held me. And he held me for a long, long time. In that moment, all the distance and misunderstandings between us dissolved into nothing. That night, for the first time, Ethan opened his heart to me. He told me that from the very first moment he saw me, he had liked me. Back then, I had been bright and unrestrained, like a rose with thorns that drew him in irresistibly. But after we married, my willfulness and constant quarrels wore him down. He didn't know how to talk to me. He thought if he just worked harder, gave me a better life, I would be happy. Instead, the more he tried, the further apart we drifted. Emily, I thought you never loved me at all, he said, looking at me with a vulnerability I had never seen before. I cupped his face and told him earnestly, I love you. I always have. I just showed it in the wrong way. His eyes reddened as he lowered his head and kissed me fiercely. He pressed me onto the bed, the frame creaking softly in protest. His tall figure loomed over me, blocking out the light until all I could feel was his breath, hot and ragged. This time, it was nothing like before. There was no distance, no formality, no sense of routine. His movements were still strong and commanding, but now there was a care, a tenderness I had never felt from him before. Beads of sweat slid down his temple and dripped onto my cheek, burning hot. He bent down and kissed the drop away, his lips unbearably gentle. I closed my eyes, taking in everything, his strength, his warmth, his heartbeat. This time I wasn't the passive Emily who only waited. I wrapped my arms around his neck, clumsy but wholehearted in my response. I felt his body tremble, followed by an even greater surge of passion. When it was over, he didn't roll away like before. Instead, he held me tightly, his chin resting on my head, his hand stroking my back in slow, steady motions. The room was quiet, filled only with the sound of our breathing and our heartbeats. Emily. His voice broke the silence, hoarse and faintly trembling. I murmured lazily from within his arms. Don't leave me again. His embrace tightened, so strong it almost suffocated me, as if letting go for even a moment would mean losing me forever. My chest ached, but I also felt more secure than I ever had. I turned to face him, tracing circles on his chest with my finger. I won't leave. Ethan Grant, listen carefully. I, Emily Reed, am sticking with you for life. If you dare to cast me aside, I'll... Before I could finish, his lips sealed mine. The kiss wasn't fierce this time, but deep and lingering, intoxicating. I nestled in his arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, feeling a peace I had never known. All our past misunderstandings, our fights, our cold wars, they felt like something from another lifetime. In that moment, I knew the invisible wall between us had finally crumbled. Our bond was sweeter and stronger than it had ever been in my past life. With our hearts reconciled, I began to devote more energy to my clothing business. I no longer wanted to be confined to the small stage of the compound. With the money I had earned, I rented a small storefront in the busiest part of the county and opened my very first boutique. I named it Light of Rain. The clothes I designed were fresh in style and bold in fabric choices. In the conservative 1980s, they quickly sparked a fashion storm. Business flourished. I hired several skilled laid-off women to expand production. In just 2 short years, I became one of the first women in the county to be known as a 10,000 yuan household, one of the earliest military wives to grow wealthy purely by her own abilities. I achieved financial independence and earned the respect of everyone around me. With no worries weighing him down, Ethan Grant's career also soared. Thanks to his outstanding performance in the joint military exercise, he was promoted ahead of schedule to Deputy Division Commander. Together, we enjoyed both love and success, becoming the model couple that everyone in the compound envied. A few years later, I expanded my business to the provincial capital, opening chain stores and establishing my own clothing brand. I was constantly busy, always on the move, but whenever I came home, there was always a light left on and a hot bowl of soup waiting for me. By then, Ethan had risen to division commander, with even heavier responsibilities on his shoulders. Yet whenever he had time, he stayed by my side, awkwardly learning how to massage my shoulders or draping a coat over me when I worked late into the night on design sketches. We never had grand vows or declarations. Instead, our love was woven into the simplest routines of daily life. A steady stream of warmth in the ordinary. On my 30th birthday, Ethan finally had a rare day off. He cooked an entire table full of my favorite dishes himself. After dinner, he pulled out a velvet box from behind his back. Inside was a beautifully crafted diamond ring. In that era, diamonds were still a rarity. "Emily," he said, dropping to one knee, his eyes solemn and filled with deep affection. "Back then, times were hard and I wronged you. Now I want to propose to you again. Will you marry me one more time?" I looked at him, at the starlight in his eyes, and as I smiled, tears spilled down my face. I held out my hand, letting him slide the ring onto my finger. "Yes, I do. Ethan Grant, whether in my past life or this one, I will always say yes." Not long after my birthday, Ethan began to act strangely. He lingered around me constantly, opening his mouth as if to speak but then saying nothing. He would stand at the kitchen door in his uniform, straight from a meeting, just watching me cook. When I worked on my design drafts, he pulled up a little stool, sitting silently beside me, staring until I felt restless under his gaze. Finally, I put down my pen. "Ethan Grant, is there something you want to say?" He cleared his throat, his cheeks faintly flushed. "Emily, don't you think it's time we had a child?" The following spring, our first son was born. Ethan named him Grant Neon, explaining, "Because when you keep something always in your heart, it will echo back." On the day I gave birth, this man who could command thousands on the battlefield paced in circles outside the delivery room, nearly wearing a hole in the hospital corridor. When the nurse finally placed our wrinkled newborn in his arms, this 6-foot-tall soldier, usually so resolute and unshakable, stood stiff as a wooden board, not knowing what to do with his hands or feet. From then on, Ethan's world revolved around work and our son. He clumsily learned to change diapers, often making a mess of both himself and the baby. He tried preparing formula, but either the water temperature was wrong or the powder clumped together, and in the end, I had to clean up after him. Everyone in the compound laughed, saying, "Looks like even Commander Grant has been conquered by his son." He never argued. Every day after work, the very first thing he did was rush home to scoop our boy into his arms, his stern face breaking into a silly, tender smile I had never seen before. When Neon turned 3, I became pregnant again, and the ultrasound revealed twins. The moment Ethan heard the news, he froze completely, sitting on the hospital bench in shock for a long time. I nudged him playfully. "What's wrong, Commander Grant? Not happy? We've got 2 this time." He jolted back to himself, grabbed my hand, and his voice trembled. "Happy? I'm just too happy." Later, I gave birth to a pair of boy and girl twins. Our son was named Grant Cheng. Our daughter was named Grant Nuo, because, as Ethan explained, a promise once made must be kept. From then on, our home became the liveliest place in the entire compound. A few more years passed. Ethan had by then become one of the youngest generals in the entire military. But inside our home, his rank meant nothing. His position in the household hierarchy was at rock bottom. One ordinary evening, I came back from a meeting at the garment factory and walked into what looked like a world war. In the living room, our eldest son, 8-year-old Grant Neon, was leading his 5-year-old brother Grant Cheng in constructing a massive fortress out of toy blocks, then launching a full-on attack with toy guns. "Charge! Seize the high ground! Cover my brother!" Blocks and toy parts were scattered across the floor, the boys' faces smeared with my lipstick, which they had used as camouflage paint. Their battle cries shook the walls. And their father, our dignified General Grant, was sitting squarely on the carpet, letting our little Princess Grant Nuo drag a pink plastic comb through his hair. "Daddy, don't move. You'll look pretty once I finish your braids, she lisped in her milky child's voice, commanding him with all the authority of a queen. Ethan's face was filled with silent despair, yet he dared not resist. He could only look at me with pleading eyes. Leaning against the doorway, I nearly burst out laughing. This was the true apex of our household's food chain, Nuo. With just one pout or a single tear, Ethan surrendered instantly. All his principles vanished. I clapped my hands. All right, soldiers, cease fire and prepare for dinner. And General Grant, you'd better rise from your throne, too. The 3 children cheered and hurled themselves into my arms. Mom's home! Ethan finally escaped, though his hair was a tangled mess from his daughter's combing, his face marked with streaks of lipstick. He looked at me with helpless fondness. Thank goodness you're back. Another minute and they'd have torn the house down. I laughed as I wiped the lipstick off his face. You've worked hard, General Grant. That night, once the 3 little ones were finally asleep, the house was quiet again. I rested against Ethan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. He wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on my head, his voice carrying both exhaustion and deep contentment. Emily. Sometimes it feels like I'm dreaming. I murmured. I always thought this life of mine would be nothing but tasks and duty, just me alone. I never imagined a home this full of life. Having you, having them, it's more than I ever thought possible. He tightened his embrace. It's so good, having you, having them. I lifted my head, kissed his chin softly, and smiled. The shadows of the past had long blurred into the distance like some distant dream. The happiness before me was real, tangible, and complete. My world was overflowing. There was nothing more to regret.